brave enough to say, this is my theory of learning and this is how I present it to the parents and teachers and the students? Would you like to do that?
Learning by, first of all, reading, reflecting, listening, and doing, and redoing.
Okay, very good.
This is all to keep Abzal fit, really.
Doing well. Okay, so this is a collected one from a chapter. They were talking generally about student engagement, fact engagement, and active learning. But I also came up with a line which I often say, which is that the best teachers are learners. Great.
I think it's the collaborative learning. The best thing we learn from each other, that is the best lesson we get. So whatever we observe, through observing our peers, through observing the teachers who are observing their heads, what are they implementing in their environment, and they are guiding their teachers. And plus if we go towards the student side, then they learn from each other working in the environment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I believe that most of the things are interconnected, and basically once the learning starts, you are building on past experience and scaffolding it and cascading it. That's how you build the tiers of further education or further levels as you go.
Indeed, very good. Thank you.
I strongly believe that as long as my students are happy in the school and they enjoy schooling, they would learn the best. So if we keep them engaged with the real life experiences, they really enjoy it a lot and they learn the best.
Excellent.
I think to me the learning is conditioning the response of the students. The conditioning of the response. If the student is able to convert the knowledge to a skill and the teacher can assess that, that's the learning. Conditioning the response. I'm talking about Skinner and the operative conditioning and the classical conditioning learning for school on.
Okay, so thank you very much for those responses. I think it's really important that we are able to articulate what we think, our own learning theory, if you like, and how we believe young people learn. I'll tell you what I think. I think there are three things. I think the first thing is that we have to understand the preconceptions and the misconceptions that students bring to the classroom, every classroom. Okay, so that's a big focus therefore on what we do around formative assessment. The second thing is that there is a very strong link between surface learning and deep learning. We don't set them up as dichotomies. We don't sort of say, okay, we must go deep first. We've got to cover the surface learning first before we can go deeper. Okay, and I think that's a critical piece in terms of how young people learn. The third bit is really important in my view, and that is getting students to narrate their own learning. Metacognition, as we call it. Okay? And this is really, really important. So what we're doing here is we're asking students to, first of all, articulate what success will look like in any given activity or task. What are the strategies that they need to put in place in order to be successful in that task? And then, if those strategies are not working, they're doing some form of monitoring and saying, okay, I'm going to change this way because it's not working for me. I need to try another way. And then ultimately evaluating whether they've been successful in the task or not. Okay, so that third bit is essentially metacognition, students narrating their own learning. Now, if you are able to talk about that with parents, teachers and students and get that across, then you've got the start of this, which is you being instructional leaders, you being pedagogical leaders, you leading the way in terms of teaching and learning in your schools. Because I think that's absolutely critical. Because if you're not on board with the quality of teaching and learning in your school, it's not going to change. Because your younger teachers, your more junior teachers, won't feel empowered, won't feel supported in terms of making them or bringing about the changes that need to happen in order to improve that quality. Okay, so thank you.
So then moving on then, why do we need them? You know, when I was kind of sitting down and thinking about this, and I kind of spoke to a number of people, these are the kind of things that we came up with. Clearly up there is to improve teaching and learning in our classrooms, because it is our core business. This is what we're all about. This is why we're here today, and this is why we come into work, because we want to make teaching and learning the best possible that we can make it, and that is what is our core business. Everything else, all the meetings and everything else is secondary. What goes on in head office isn't really important. What goes off in regional office isn't really important, as long as the core business in the classroom is right. To create an environment of high challenge, low fear. And that is students in an environment where there's no such thing as a silly question. Even teachers, if they are indeed asked a question and they don't know the answer to it, they're able to say, do you know what, I don't know, but I'll find out for you. It's the fact that nobody will come up to them and say, oh, well, why didn't you know the answer? Or to say to the students, how come you don't know that? Why didn't you read that textbook? Why didn't you read when you went home? Why didn't you look it up? It's that having that high challenge, allowing them to create that environment. And I think if we can create that environment within our schools and in our classrooms, then we will have achieved quite a lot. And I know we're on the track to do that. To create an environment in which all our teachers are teaching for effective learning. So it's not just one or two and the others don't do it. It's a team effort. Every single teacher, every single person that's in the classroom, whether they're a teaching assistant, whether they're a teacher, whether they're out on the field teaching, that we're all responsible, we're all in this together, and that's the only way that we are going to improve teaching and learning in the classroom. And then to ensure that each student makes at least expected progress. So where are our students when they first arrive to us, into our classrooms? Where do they need to be by the time we finish with them in a year's time, or in a month's time, or 6 months' time? And more importantly, do the students know what they've got to do to get from A to B? And do our teachers know what they've got to do with our students in order for them to make at least expected progress?
So, this last point, to ensure each student makes at least expected progress. Okay. So this is quite an interesting one actually, because even if we know from PISA studies, we know from TIM studies, we know from all these sort of global standardized tests around the world, that just putting a warm body in front of a group of students will make what we call a 0.4 effect size growth over 12 months. In other words, the natural rate of development will happen, regardless of who they have in front of them. What we've got to do as teachers, as schools, as systems of schools, is actually raise the level of that expectation above the 0.4 impact or the 0.4 effect size. So the question is, how are you going to measure this? How are you going to measure progress? What are you going to put in place to understand that first, this is where the student was at the beginning of the year, and this is how we measure progress throughout the year. What do you do to understand that now, and what would you like to do to actually sort of understand that better? Okay, so please talk to the person sitting next to you. So, how do we measure progress and how do we make it better?
First of all, I just want to add one thing. That you were talking about learning. 21st century learner is the one who can not only learn, but can unlearn and then relearn. That is the thing. As far as how do we measure the progress, for example, first of all, whenever we have some students with us, we just have to see attainment targets. For example, the child of 10 years or 12 years, by the time he or she is 12 years, are they able to answer all these questions? So assessment is one of the tools to measure the attainment. So finally, I think attainment target is the criteria. Okay. According to me. Thank
you. As a school head, I'm going to observe my students there will be a change in their needs, change in their behavior. The demands will also change. You know, as they grow, they are learning, they are going beyond that 0.4%, their behavior will change, their need and demand will change, and finally, we should assess them through summative and formative assessment tools. So by taking those tests, we always keep the attainment target in front of us. As city school heads, we all know, while making our papers, we always have our learning outcomes in front of us where we design our papers. So we will, as a head, I will be doing these things to see the progress of my students. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think there are multiple ways for assessment, whether it is formative or summative. However, what is needed is to explore what child knows, and how to explore that can entail a lot of strategies, you know, by looking at him, talking to the child, getting him engaged in hands-on activities. There are multiple ways. You can't fix one way or the other. There are multiple strategies. What is needed is to know what strategy to be used at what time effectively, and what fits my purpose. So if that is known to the teacher, and she's an effective teacher who can determine that how this assessment is going to take place, it's not copy, it's not pencil, it's not outcome. Learning can never be linear. It has to go randomly, and it takes place at any time. So maybe 4 comes before 2, or maybe 2 comes before 4. Doesn't matter, I can still learn it. So when we make learning sequential, that's where we make a mistake. It cannot always be sequential. Yes, there are subjects where sequence is required, and there are subjects where no sequence is required. So assessment is a deep, very, very vast topic. How children will be observed should come from here, from the head of the teacher. That is it. And there are multiple ways. Thank you.
Just behind.
Basically, what I feel is we have to triangulate the data. We get data from various sources. We need to triangulate that to measure the authenticity of that. And learning analytics is one of the way. Like, we keep on cropping, tailoring, modifying according to the need of the students. And we do have a process of diagnostic assessment which we have at the beginning of the year, where the teachers measure and find out about the learning needs of the students. Based on that, we keep on monitoring and changing our strategies.
In fact, in my opinion, this is very important that how clear and crisp your expected progress is. Because if your objectives are not very clear, that at the end of the year, what and where would you like to see your kid? If this is hazy, then all the assessment and everything because you're not assessing anything, you're not assessing for the objective. So I think the very first thing is that the expected progress, that should be very clear. And then people have already said that there are multiple ways, formative assessment and summative assessment, dialogues, many other things. But first of all, what would you like to see at the end? This should be very clear.
Yeah. Great, so very good responses. And what we do to encourage such good responses?
So thank you very much for engaging that question. It's really hard, actually. It's not an easy question at all. And actually it comes down to some of these points that were being made here in terms of, okay, well, what is it really you're trying to see progress in? So let's take, for example, inference in reading comprehension, understanding the text when you read it. Now, there may well be an assessment, and you will choose this, so this is where professional learning communities come in, primarily within the faculty itself, but of course, you know, given that you are a large group of schools, you can share some of these through your assessment division. You may decide that there is a really good baseline assessment in terms of reading comprehension for your grade 7s, your grade 8s, and so on. That is your baseline data. Performance of that will give you a starting point. And then what you're interested in is, okay, a teaching program which accelerates the learning in terms of inference from reading comprehension. And then you're interested in a common assessment piece at the end of that learning progression. Now, that's when you can use calculations like effect sizes, and is there a mathematician in the room here? Any mathematicians? There's a mathematician, okay, he's in the assessment division, okay. So you understand how to calculate an effect size, don't you? Okay. Now effect sizes are really good at giving you an understanding of the progression that has been made, as long as you're comparing one assessment, and it's an apple, if you like, with another apple to after that learning progression. Now, effect sizes give you an understanding of that progression that's been made for not just the class or the cohort, but for each individual student. And that then starts the conversation as to why that happened. It's not, that doesn't go onto the report card. Okay? Keep it off the report card. What you're interested in, the conversations within the professional learning community. Sorry, this is sort of going in and out. You're interested in the conversations that happen within the professional learning community about each and every student that you have a little effect size for. And that's when you start talking about this. Okay? So it's just something for you to think about, sir. I'd be very interested to talk to you more about it afterwards. But understanding effect sizes, as long as we're measuring very similar things before and after a learning progression, we can get a very good sense of how to measure progress and where students are in terms of their expected progress and whether they're above or below it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So how will these teaching and learning communities work then? How are we going to achieve this mammoth task that we've got on our hands? Well, just a couple of points there. First of all, I think with anything we have to do an audit. We have to find out to get the current picture of learning and teaching in classrooms. Most of you, I'm sure, will sort of be doing that anyway as sort of everyday practice. But making sure that we're aware of it and making sure that we've got our network heads aware of it, because recently we've made sure that all our networks now have a network head. So how we would see this working at City School is through networks, through their own networks. So where are we? Where do we need to be? And how are we going to get there? I'm being harassed by this fly at the moment. Each network to have a dynamic working group which will bring fresh